That is 3 losses in a row for the Indiana Pacers. Got to break down their 2 losses this weekend to the Atlanta Hawks and the Memphis Grizzlies, where it's clear this team misses Tyrese Haliburton. We'll talk about how they played differently, what they can do better without their star point guard, who's out for still over a week, plus probably more going forward. At the end, we'll talk about one big positive from this weekend, Chris Duarte. Slump busting game on Saturday night, all coming today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI. And today, diving into the Pacers weekend, that was, ouch, is where to start with this because, look, a lot of context needed here. They're without 3 starters in one of the games. They're without 2 key ones in the next game. Tyrese Haliburton being one of them is obviously going to be brutal, but they got their butts kicked by the Grizzlies. They've now lost 3 games in a row, which doesn't even sound like that much, but only for the second time this season now are the Pacers on a 3-game losing streak. They lost in Sacramento, in Utah, in Portland before their big win in Golden State, and then right now is their second 3-game losing streak of the season. This team has been so good at responding, and they'll have to now because between the Knicks, the game that Halliburton got hurt, and the 2 they just played without him, they're currently on that streak with tough games coming. Milwaukee, Denver, Phoenix, all on the docket on the road this coming week. You know we'll be breaking it all down here on Locked On Pacers. But let's start with this weekend that was for the Pacers. A close loss to Atlanta, heartbreak at the buzzer, and a crushing loss to the Grizzlies. And look, this was the first look at the no Halliburton Pacers, and we'll dive into that in the next segment. But there was a lot else missing, right? Brissett was hobbled. Nesmith missed 1 game with an illness. Miles Turner missed both games with back spasms, right? Chris Duarte had to exit 1 game with a hand injury. Like, they are a banged-up basketball team right now. Goga missed as well the second game with a sickness, stomach bug kind of deal, right? Like, they're missing guys, and that makes it hard when you're already missing your number 1 guy. Sure, I'm willing to give them a lot of grace. They're figuring out a new rotation, which we'll talk about, and all this stuff. That said, they had some rough moments in this weekend that really kind of changed the tide of both of the games they're in. And to me, the way you want to talk about this tough weekend, even with the context of missing a ton of guys and having to sort through a ton of new lineups, like they're starting 5 on Friday against Atlanta. Isaiah Jackson, who's barely started the season, Benedict Mathurin's first home start of his entire career, and Chris Duarte, who's barely started the season, all starting. Like, they had to play around that stuff. But to me, the big thing that the Pacers had go against them this weekend is big runs, huge runs. And like, look, basketball can be a game of runs sometimes. That cliche has been said time and time again. But with the guys they had available, it's harder for them to steady the ship and prevent this kind of thing, because without a star level guy to settle you down or break up a play on both ends, right? They missed their star defender in Turner as well. They don't have the level of play to slow down runs as easily. Like, TJ McConnell talked about how it's important to lock in for the next play, right? And that's true. Like, that can be key. And stopping a run is just staying focused and not getting caught up in the momentum of the game. And Rick Carlisle talked about, like, yeah, timeouts can be important, but like, remember, the game plan, all sorts of stuff matters. But at some point, it's just like your talent is going to hurt you, and that cost them both games to me, right? Against Atlanta, there were really 2. Rick Carlisle harped on one after the game on Friday. They were up, not big, but some pretty good lead for the Pacers early in the fourth quarter, up 7. They were playing well, right? They had the Hawks figured out. They played pretty good the entire Atlanta game. And then a 14-0 Hawks run that completely turned the game around. It was 62-55 with 11 minutes to go in that quarter. Next thing you know, the Hawks have a big lead at 69-55 not long after, right? That was a huge, huge moment in this game, and it happened so fast, right? The Hawks just crushed the Pacers for a second there, and that really changed the game. They needed all of that run to get the win, and the Pacers battled hard, but that was huge, right? And the Pacers couldn't slow them down. They scored those points in a heartbeat. Like, it felt like you blinked and you missed it, and that really ended up changing the game. They scored all those 14 points in under 3 minutes, right? That was huge. And then in the fourth quarter, the Pacers had a bunch of trouble scoring again, right? They were up 99-90 with 9 minutes to go, and they finished with 111. That means they scored 12 points in the final 9 minutes and 2 seconds, whereas the Hawks scored 23, right? Like those runs were killer for this Pacers team, and that's in part due to the fact that without Halliburton and Turner too, but without their number one maestro to get them a bucket to stop these runs, right? It's really tough to consistently have your foot on the gas offensively. And in the fourth quarter against Atlanta, everything was going wrong. Like poor decision making from Andrew Nembhard was a big factor in that stretch, and some missed general shots. Like Buddy Hield didn't have the greatest shooting game, and Mathurin had a great game, but not necessarily the greatest fourth quarter. Like all this stuff went into the struggles. Nembhard had a really off night that night. 6 points and 16 shots was pretty poor. They just needed a little bit more, and they couldn't get it. And then Memphis, the same thing. Like the game story cannot be told in one quarter when you get your butt kicked like this. But to me, the second quarter where Memphis just took this game away, the Pacers were actually winning early in the second quarter, right? Like that is kind of jarring to me to think about. They were up 41-40 early in the second quarter in this game. 40-39 with 9:43 to go in this quarter. The Pacers led the Grizzlies 40-39. And then you just scroll through the quarter, and all of a sudden the Grizzlies lead 68-49 with 33 seconds to go. So over a 9-minute stretch again, they went on a 29-9 run, and just like that is a 20-point swing, and the Pacers lose that game by 18, right? Like it's not that easy, but the Pacers were down 19 after that run, and they lost by 18. They won the game for the rest of the way. Like from the minute it got to 68-49 late in the second to the end, the Pacers beat the Grizzlies. Granted, there was a lot of garbage time that went into that. Had the starters kept playing for Memphis, they would have done better. But the Pacers played like fine basketball after that point. But these runs were so killer. Atlanta had a big one, and Memphis had a big one. And that came in part because they were missing their most talented player and their most talented defender in the same games. It's a lot harder to slow them down. There were a lot of other things that went into that. Like I said, the poor decision making, the roulette of lineups, but it was really, really tough in these games. That said, more context. Look, you're missing a ton of guys. I think this Grizzlies game, I still think the Celtics are the best team the Pacers have played. The record says that too. But the Grizzlies, who were top of the West after that game, I think Denver just won on a Jokic buzzer beater like an hour before I started recording. So they're back to on top of the West. But Memphis is basically on top of the West and has won 9 games in a row now. They are kicking everybody's butt. And you saw what Morant can do. That dunk he had. Holy smokes. Credit to Jalen Smith for trying to block it. I love when guys try to block those dunks, but that might be the best dunk I ever see in my entire life. Like that's what the Grizzlies are. They come at you all night, and they never stop, and they can make momentum game-changing plays. Too much Memphis context. The Pacers played two really good teams, but those kind of runs I think will be frequent with Halliburton. And that was a big problem for the Pacers last year, is they gave up a lot of big runs and would play fine for a lot of other moments of the game. That's other stuff that happened in these losses to me that was troubling for the Pacers, but stuff they can overcome as they get a little better without Tyrese Haliburton. Is they just had some stinker lineups that just didn't work, right? The starting five being one of them against Atlanta, for example. But like when they're mixing and matching in the way they are with a bunch of new players in the mix, like Isaiah Jackson is starting now and Mathurin's starting now, so like the bench looks different and all this stuff, you get a lot of groups that don't fit as well or don't have quite enough there's either one or the other. They have too much creation for others and not enough self-creation. Like they play McConnell and Nembhard together and stuff like that. Or they have too much self-creation when they play Mathurin and Hield together, not enough for others. And so things don't perfectly click. And I think those guys will get better at playing with each other when they get more reps, but it was just kind of tough. So really, I think that the Pacers were the less talented team in both games they played, and they could have won the Atlanta game. I bet they think they should have won the Atlanta game. At the end of that game, for those who didn't see it, it was tied at 111. Trae Young took a deep three. He was double covered with a couple seconds left. He missed, and it bounced out far. The long rebound fell right to DeJounte Murray at the elbow. He thought he had to shoot right away, even though he had a little time, and he also missed. So it looked like the Pacers dodged kind of a bullet on that one. It fell right to John Collins, who tipped it in with 0.3 to go. That was the game. That's tough. Rebounding's a problem for the Pacers, although they actually won the rebounding battle against the Hawks. We'll talk about rebounding in the second segment. But there were a lot of just little things over the course of the weekend that you go, they really missed that Tyrese Haliburton guy. 3 straight losses for the second time this season. First time since, like I said, that road trip stretch against Sacramento Utah, and Portland. And after that, they casually won in Golden State, beat the Wizards, beat the Warriors again, and kind of stabilized their season before their really impressive run in late December. But look, the last time they were on a 3-game losing streak, one of the losses was in November. It's been a while. They've got to find a way to recover. They've been a response team all season, but it will be a lot harder because they don't have that guy, Tyrese Haliburton. Let's talk about what they looked like differently without him, what they need to do differently without him. And some of this stuff can be adjusted with personnel changes. Some of this can be adjusted as they just get more chemistry without him, but they clearly looked worse. What can the Pacers do better without their star guard going forward for a few weeks? Let's talk about that. But before we do so, let me talk to you guys about PrizePicks. PrizePicks, super fun concept. You pick a player and a stat for them. Will they go over under that? Will Steph Curry have more than 4.5 3-pointers made? Will Kevin Durant have more or less than 6.5 assists when he plays, whenever he returns to the court? That's the entire concept, right? Pick 2 to 6 players. Will they score more or less in their PrizePicks projection? You can up to 25 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. That's why I like it. You're not going against people who can out-research you. It's just you. And they offer projections on any sport you watch: NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL. You name it, they've got it. College sports as well. You can make your entries in a minute or less. It's safe, with fast withdrawals and operational over 30 states plus Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, they'll give you $100. You deposit $50, they'll give you $50. You get the idea, but don't forget, you got to use that code Locked On, all one word, at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100 at PrizePicks. Daily fantasy made easy. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Grizzlies to hear what they have to say about the surging 9-straight-win Memphis Grizzlies. And, again, probably going to end up being the dunk of the season in Gainbridge Fieldhouse from Ja Morant. Sorry for gushing about it twice on this show. I lost concentration for a lot of the rest of that third quarter. Like, Jalen Smith blocked a dunk like 100 seconds later, and I forgot about it until reviewing tape of the game the next day. Like, that is how crazy that third quarter was. And credit to Jalen Smith for sticking with it. He got Zaire Williams at the rim. At the rim. Less than 2 minutes later. Pacers lose both games without Halliburton. They're now 1-3 without him. The Nembhard game in Golden State being their only win. And look, they're going to look differently without the guy for many reasons, right? But some stats to just start off this discussion. Jump off the page, right? The Pacers have shot under 40% from the field in a game 5 times this season. That's it, right? They've played, I can't do math right now, 44 times. Only 5 times have they been under 40%. 2 of them were this weekend, right? They shot 39.6%, going 40 for 101 against Atlanta, and against Memphis, they went 38 for 103 for 36.9%, their second lowest of the season. Their other 3, losing at home to Minnesota when they scored 101, losing at home to Miami when they scored 82, and losing in LA against the Clippers at 38.3%. So 2/5 of their poor shooting nights this weekend. Bad clutch play against the Hawks. Tyrese Haliburton's a big part of their clutch play, right? I think you'll see that struggle. They can't shoot as well. Tyrese Haliburton creates threes himself and can drill them off the dribble, right? One of the most efficient high-volume players in the league, and creates them for others. Buddy Hield had his first game with 0 3-pointers made all season, the entire season this weekend, right? He made 0 threes against the Grizzlies for the first time. He had 5 points. That was his lowest scoring game of the entire season, right? That kind of thing. Not only do you lose Tyrese Haliburton, you lose the effectiveness of guys who play well off of Tyrese Haliburton. I talked about that last Friday. Buddy Hield is the perfect example, and their poor shooting this weekend really was the perfect way to describe that, right? 7 made threes against Atlanta, their lowest of the season. They made 11 against the Grizzlies, which is higher and closer to their average. They took 47. They shot 23.4%. They actually shot about the same percentage in both games. Awful from 3 in both. And that number, I think, will get better even without Halliburton. Their pace, a tiny bit slower. They say they want to play the same pace, and I believe that they want to play the same pace, but it's harder with the guys that they have. When you don't have Tyrese Haliburton's ability to process the game fast and to play fast with that processing speed, it's hard to do both, and he can do both. We'll talk more about Nembhard and McConnell in a second, but look, McConnell, I guess, like to talk about it now, they can both run, and they can both process the game pretty well. Like I just kind of said both. Nembhard, especially in traffic in the lane, his passing there is awesome. TJ McConnell, when he manipulates the defense with his drives, he understands where the ball needs to go. But they don't get that read as fast as Tyrese Haliburton does. They don't have the ability to manipulate with their eyes and body as well as he does. And they can't do it with as much speed involved. So it just naturally slows down things a tiny bit. Not a lot, but a tiny bit. And when you build your identity on being fast, it's a little trickier. And Nembhard didn't have the best weekend with his decision-making. Buddy Hield needs some Halliburton. Neesmith needs some Halliburton, right? He went 0 for 6. Granted, he missed some time. Like, all this stuff together kind of shows the stats show that they miss him, obviously. And look, everybody knew they would miss him. He's their best player. He's like, he might still be an all-star. The injury might pull him out of that. I don't know. I still think he should be even sitting these 2 weeks or whatever it ends up being. But they're going to have to play a tiny, tiny bit differently. Like, I don't think they have to sacrifice their identity completely, although I thought maybe they would play a slower enough style. But, when I asked Rick Carlisle about this before the Hawks game, like, how do you feel like here's how I asked it, because all season Carlisle's called Halliburton a basketball savant and talked about how he's changed the culture and identity of the way the team plays. And he's also talked about, on questions from others, not from me, about how this team, he doesn't call as many plays, and this team doesn't call as many plays, but Halliburton calls some plays when he's in there, right? So like a player that is in charge of your identity shift and can do all these crazy things to make your offense efficient and literally is sometimes calling the plays to run your offense. Like that is a ton to lose all at once. So I said, with all that being lost, how do you feel? Do you feel like you'll have to play differently to change your identity? And he said, quote, "Some things are going to change just by nature of not having an all-star caliber point guard, but our team's style of play and our other 2 point guards can play this current style well too. It's just going to be different," right? So I think I interpreted that to mean, and other players said this too, right? Jalen Smith said it, Nembhard said it, like they're going to have the same identity. They'll just have to kind of tweak things ever so slightly. So what did they do? And can this be something that works? And I think the first thing I want to talk about is the change they'd made, that they have to do well every game now until he returns, and that they did do pretty well against Atlanta and okay against the Grizzlies. They have to play the possession game. And what I mean by that is the Grizzlies are one of the best teams in the league at this, or at least they were last year. I talk about this a lot, so this is repeating for some of you, but offensive efficiency or offensive rating or whatever you want to call it, points per possession. Everybody talks about maximizing the points part, right? If you have a really efficient offense, your points will be great, right? You're maximizing the numerator. But what if you minimize the opponent's denominator? For example, if you have way more possessions, even if your efficiency is a little less, but you have all these extra possessions, you can overcome that. And so if you're the Pacers, right, and Tyrese Haliburton has been huge for you, when he's in the game, the team's effective field goal percentage this season is 56%. When he's on the bench, it's 50.4%. That was before the Memphis game. I mean, it can't have shifted that much, right? Like almost a 6% difference in efficiency of shot finishing when he's in the game. That's a huge difference. Without that, how do you make that up? The easiest way, or not the easiest way, but the lowest hanging fruit way to me is to dominate the possession game, right? Have literally more chances than the other team. And they did a really good job of this against the Hawks, right? They won the rebound battle by 1, but they still won it 50-51. And they had 19 offensive rebounds, 14 for Atlanta. That's 5 extra possessions, right? And you have to look at some things that will skew some of these stats, like free throw attempts will make the shot totals look different, but they were close enough. Pacers took 7 more shots than the Hawks. They took 8 more free throws, right? So they had a lot more chances. 5 offensive rebounds played a big part in that. The other thing the Pacers have to do is turnovers. Only 12, right? Less than the Hawks. And so they win the possession battle. They literally have more chances to score. So the Hawks shot 44%, 43.6 to be exact. And they made 9 more threes than the Pacers, right? That's way more efficient. That's hard to overcome. And yet the Pacers were right in it. They were winning late. They lost on basically a buzzer-beating tip-in because they had way more chances, right? They actually only made 1 fewer shot than the Hawks in this game because they took 7 more shots and took more free throws. They won the possession battle. I think that is huge for them without Tyrese Haliburton, because something Carlisle said after that game, they have like way little margin for error. And I think that was a great way to put it, right? If you have less of that margin for error, you have to be as good as possible when you can, and winning the possession battle is one way to do that, right? He said, our margins for error are really just almost non-existent. And that wasn't necessarily a Halliburton-related quote, but it is relevant to this discussion. So against the Grizzlies, a fantastic rebounding team, they won the rebounding battle again. 16 offensive rebounds for the Pacers, 7 for the Grizzlies. They win the rebounding battle, 49-45. Granted, they had more turnovers in this game, but they dominated that battle by so much that even with even free throw attempts, they took 16 more shots than the Grizzlies. Like, that gave them a chance. And like I said, outside of that second quarter run, they basically played them even all night. Like, that is huge for the Pacers. They're going to have to be, and when Turner returns, they didn't have Turner for these games. Jackson and Smith were excellent on the glass. When Turner returns, they'll still have to be great on offense, and they absolutely must take care of the ball. Nembhard and McConnell have to be awesome taking care of it. Nembhard, for all the poor decisions he makes, especially with his shot, did not turn the ball over much in heavy minutes this weekend, to his credit. That's a big thing. Pace control is going to be a big thing, right? They want to play fast still. I think they can be a top half in pace team right now, but I don't think they can be close to the top 5 that they've been all season without Tyrese Haliburton. So control the pace, right? That's how Nembhard described it. Play faster, but not full speed, warp speed like they kind of did with Halliburton running. Their pace dropped by 2 points in a game, basically, against the Hawks. He said, Nembhard said, I feel as though we can do the same things, right, is how he described it. So I think that's a big thing, controlling the pace with him out and play better on defense. Look, like that is something that Halliburton's not good at, is defending. Their defensive rating's a little bit better with him on the bench than on the court. So that is something they can make their bread and butter. Defend well. They defended pretty well against Atlanta. They did not against Memphis. They got blown out. They have to defend better without Halliburton. Look, they say they can maintain their identity. I think it's true that in the sense that their style doesn't have to drastically change, but they will be a little worse and a little slower at the things that made the Pacers for the first 41 games of the season until Halliburton returns in 2 weeks. They have to do their best to slightly tweak their identity, small tweaks. Carlisle said, I think that was the best way to put it, right? So with Turner returns, I think we'll see really what the Pacers will look like with Halliburton. Now then they'll basically have everybody back. And so what will that totally look like? What tweaks do they need to make? They need to slow it down ever so slightly, right? Don't be so aggressive in transition. Don't look for your early offense every single time. The early offense is still good, but you get what I'm saying, right? Win that possession game, be methodical, all those sorts of things. That's what I think is key. And I think they'll get better at playing without him in time. But right now, right, they've only done it for 4 games this season, 2 games right now with their current level of players. They'll get better, but certainly worse right now. As you saw this weekend, we will see how it ends up going. But one good thing did happen this weekend. Look, the Pacers went 0-2. Actually, 2 good things happened. Pacers did go 0-2. They got clobbered by Memphis. The vibes were a little low without Tyrese, at least from a fan perspective. I think the team is still in really good spirits. TJ McConnell was good. That's one thing. But the big thing that's segment worthy, Chris Duarte, slump busting game. The Pacers will hope, at least. And Chris Duarte will hope. 25 points. Leads the team in made shots against the Grizzlies. Massive performance for a guy that could not hit anything. Is this a sustainable thing? Can he keep it going? What does it mean for the team? We'll talk about that to close today's show. Before we do that, though, let me tell you guys about Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you have to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays. I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. Some of you can tell that I just got back from the gym. And if you're like me, where you want to eat healthier but don't want to compromise taste, then that is where Built Bar comes in for you. Healthy and tasty. They're covered in 100% real chocolate on a healthy thing, yes. And there's so many good flavors. My favorite is the peanut butter brownie. Coconut almond is really good. There's a churro one that's really good. And now you can get them in stores, but I'm not sure how Built Bar does it. They taste like a candy bar while having awesome macros, right? Only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein. You don't have to wait around for the box anymore by ordering them. You can get them at Sam's Club. You can get them at Walmart, right? The pharmacy section at Walmart's going to have a 4-pack box. You can get a 13-bar box at Sam's Club. You've got to try them. Or go to Built.com and check them out yourself. I love them, and I know you will too. Try them today, Built.com. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, Pacers Bucks tonight. Check out Locked On Bucks with Kane Pittman and his awesome Australian accent, as well as Frank Madden doing an awesome job covering the Greek Freak and the Bucks, who are a great team. We'll talk Bucks tomorrow. Right now, it's time to talk about Chris Duarte. Huge moment for him this season, even if it's just a moment. 25 points against Memphis. Best game in a long time for him since that 30-point game against Brooklyn. A big Chris Duarte game. He hurt his hand in the middle of the game, right when he already had, I think, 12 points at the time. He hurt his left hand right before halftime. Clearly so mad, right? Finally having a good game, finally getting some mental back. And he punches this chair and he goes to the locker room and he comes back for the second half, fights through it, and still maintains the awesome game, right? So a huge Chris Duarte game. Before we dive into it, I have no idea if it's sustainable. It's one game. Their whole rotation's out of whack, but it was much needed for him and the Pacers. And that is the big thing, right? The Pacers need somebody to step up with Halliburton out. If it can be the guy who has been really slumping, who was very promising last year, that would be huge, right? And Chris Duarte needs this as much as the Pacers do, as a guy who really needed a mental boost and really needed to just see some shots go in, see some free throws go in, see something go through the net. And he was awesome in this game, right? It's really hard to come back from a big 6-week injury, and that I think gives him some grace of time. But this stretch was really rough from Duarte. Like, he missed 21 shots in a row from the Hawks game on December 27th to the Portland game on January 6th. So to see him have this game that he did against Memphis, the fourth highest scoring game of his career. Like, I don't think people realize how good this game was for him. He had a 27-point game to open last season, a 30-point game this year, and then this was his second 25-point game of his career. So that'd be the fourth highest scoring game of his career, or tied for it. 7 made shots, led the team. 4 made threes, led the team. 7 made free throws, led the team. 3 boards, 3 assists, and the most crazy thing to me, given the way this game went, +2 in the plus minus. He played almost 30 minutes and was a +2 in an 18-point loss. So in 18 minutes, basically without him, they got their butts handed to them, right? He was really solid. And Carlisle's been talking about, like, it's hard to come back from these long injuries and fit in right away. And, like, you know, obviously we're giving him time and we know he can be better than this and all this stuff. Like, they weren't sugarcoating that he was missing shots, but they knew it would happen. And leading up to this game, right, 2 makes against the Knicks and looked a little more comfortable putting the ball on the floor. And he made some nice decisions to me against the Hawks after dribbling, even though, again, the shots weren't falling in those games, right? Still some brutal off nights. And I think a lot of people felt like he was going to turn the corner, and you could see his focus level before this game against Memphis, and boom, there it was. 25, was making shots from everywhere. He had 2 in a row in the first quarter. And at that point, I put in my notes, like, okay, let's see if this is a thing for him. And then he actually airballed his next shot, but then he made a couple free throws and he never looked back from that early miss. Like, he looked really comfortable. He could put it on the floor and score. He could score and catch and shoots, like all the stuff that made him really threatening as a rookie were there. And it was a huge night for him. The Pacers really needed it. He really needed it. And that is where I thought it was needed for him, right? Even if he just becomes like a 12 to 15 points guy the next couple of games, he'll at least have confidence now. And you could see in this game what that meant. Like, no hesitation when he'd catch the ball. He'd put it on the floor right away to know what direction to go. He would swing it to the right guy. Even when he wasn't shooting, you could see how confidence impacted his play in a positive way. And making 2 straight, of course, I think finally, like, the brain fog or whatever you want to call the mental hurdle went away for him. And he admitted that himself, which I think can be really challenging for a player. Like, even if they're going through it or not confident, they're going to say, like, look, I think I can do this. I'm in the NBA for a reason. Like Duarte said after the game, I said, you know, what did this mean for you to finally see these shots go in? Basically, he said, feels good, man. I needed it. I needed to see the ball go in. He said it felt like he found some rhythm out there. And he was really thankful for it. TJ McConnell was sitting right next to him because he also had a nice game. But, you know, McConnell, he was really thankful for McConnell in the way McConnell kind of propped him up. And it was a good vet for him over these couple of weeks while he was missing shots, because you need all the encouragement you can get. And I think a key thing for Duarte is he was on this exact team last year, right? So all these guys, or most of them, I should say, not all of them, right? TJ and Tyrese, even Miles, everybody who's been playing, Buddy Hield, almost everybody in the rotation except for Neesmith, Nembhard, and Mathurin have played with him before. They've seen him be really good, including the Brooklyn game this year. Like, everybody's seen him be at his best. You know, that gives them confidence that he can recover. He's just got to get through this. And so he talked about how the coaches were really helpful for him. And, you know, Scott Agnes asked him about him watching his own highlights. Is that something he did to, you know, stay motivated? He said, yeah, of course. You know, you got to watch that kind of stuff to keep him going through it. And he made it through. He had this 25-point game, and this could be huge for his confidence. If he continues to move the way he did in that game, and even if he just shoots like 4 for 9 or 4 for 10 for the next couple of games for the Pacers, that is a huge improvement from the Chris Duarte that we've seen since that 14-point game he had in Boston. And I was wrong. After that game, I said, Chris Duarte is back, right? He played a game before that at I forget who they played, and he was back, like, physically on the court. But that Boston game, he looked back, like, mentally and everything, and then he was just brutal for the next couple of weeks. And this game, he looked good again, and the confidence you could see in him, I think, will be huge for this team. If he could be anything close to that a couple of times in the stretch with that Halliburton, that would be huge. But also, look, all these guys have seen him be better and all that, but they have believed in him. But I understand fans having skepticism that, you know, he missed 21 shots in a row. This is a completely new system for this Pacers team, and he has yet to consistently find a way to fit in it. So I understand everyone thinking this could just be a one-game flash in the pan. It was before, although, of course, it was brutal last time that he didn't get a chance to follow up his big performance. I'm very curious to see how he plays tomorrow or tonight for you guys listening against Milwaukee. But look, huge game for him to kind of clear the mental fog and get more focused and confident. Huge game for the Pacers to have another guy that maybe you can hopefully rely on with Halliburton out. And in general, for the ecosystem of a growing, building team, to have your young player who was all rookie last year finally look a little bit like the guy you had as the rookie. That's huge for the Pacers. We'll see what it looks like today. I keep saying tonight. The game's at 2:30 when they play the Bucks. A nice matinee. I love matinee games in terms of what my day ends up looking like. We'll, of course, be breaking all that down here on Locked On Pacers tomorrow. What happened in Pacers Bucks, the turn and return, who stepped up, who needs to step up, all that sort of stuff. Tough week for the Pacers, right? Travel back-to-back, and then another travel back-to-back on the weekend. We'll, of course, be covering it all for you here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Hope you all had a great weekend. Thank you all so much for listening. We will see you tomorrow.